And we're now joined by Laura McCallum, a Scottish solicitor with Lombardi Associates, and Laura has a master's degree in international sports law. How are you getting on, Laura?
I'm very good, thank you. How are yourself, Johnny?
Grand. I think everyone's getting fairly fed up about Brexit-related conversation at this stage. I'm sure you living in the UK, it's no different over there, but we're here to discuss the sporting ramifications of everything, and you're particularly well placed to talk to us about that. And just, I suppose, briefly at the top, this could be pretty huge, I would imagine, for sport in general in Britain, and I suppose more pertinently, football and the Premier League.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's certainly going to impact in various areas with regards to football, from immigration to how football clubs deal with minors, and also in relation to kind of financial benefits, financial revenues. I think they're going to be the three areas that clubs will feel the most, certainly in England, Scotland, Northern Ireland and Wales, but even potentially in the Republic of Ireland too.
Just at the moment, what are the rules for sort of non-EU players who want to play in the UK, and you know what could change in this regard?
So currently, for any non-EU and EEA players, that's your European Economic Area players, we have a visa system in place that clubs have to go through a governing body endorsement system to get the player in. So basically, depending on what country the player is coming to, so I'll start with Scotland because it's a bit more simpler with England. In Scotland, if the player does which is that they have to have played so many international caps for their national team, and that national team has to be ranked either 70 or above in the FIFA World Rankings. They go to an exceptions panel, and that's for the club to be able to establish that that player is exceptional. And the way they do that is they have to be able to prove that the player is of a significant calibre to contribute to the development of the game in Scotland. Now, moving to England, it's a bit more complicated and it's very strict. And this is where I think most of the issues are going to arise. This is where players and clubs will feel it the most. So England has, again, an automatic criteria system. So again, based on international caps. It's a bit of a tiered system depending on where your national team is ranked. If the player doesn't currently meet that, they go to an exceptions panel again, the way they do in Scotland. It's currently estimated that around 2/3 of the players who are currently playing in the Premier League and who are of either EU or EEA nationality would currently not meet the automatic criteria, so they would have to go through the exceptions panel.
2/3?
2/3, and it's considered that the majority of those won't pass the exceptions panel. So I'll talk you through briefly a little bit about what it is they look for in this exceptions panel. So basically it's very, very strict, and it's based on mainly transfer fees and wages. So basically the player, the club, when bringing the player in, has to pitch their transfer fee over and above the 75th percentile of all transfer fees being paid in the Premier League. That gets you 3 points. So it's a point system, basically. So if you can hit 4 or more points, the general feeling is that you'll get your governing body endorsement. If you're below those points, the recommendation is that that endorsement should be rejected. So transfer fees over and above the 75th percentile, that's getting you 3 points. If you can pitch it between the 50th and the 75th percentile, you're getting 2 points. It then goes to wages. So the clubs have to pitch their wages in or around the top 20 Premier League earners. Again, over and above the 75th percentile, 3 points. If you're in between the 50th and 70th, you drop down your points again. The other thing that the exceptions panel will look at is appearances in a top 6 league. So if the player is currently playing in a top 6 league and is actively playing, you'll get points for that. And you'll also get points if the player has been actively playing in a UEFA club competition or an equivalent competition. So that might be your Copa Libertadores in South America, for instance. So you can appreciate that it's very, very strict in terms of the criteria that has to be met for the exceptions panel.
Without being stupid, can this all change then?
Pardon?
Without being kind of stupid, can this all change in the event of Brexit? Can they just kind of change the rules to suit themselves?
Well, potentially what's happening just now is there's talks with the UK government between all of the football stakeholders. That's your Premier League, your English Football League, the FA, the SFA and the SPFL up here. And basically what the government's saying is that, going forward, we're not going to have preferential treatment for the EU. We want to keep this governing body endorsement system in place. We're open to changing it. So we're open to changing how it currently is just now, because you'll appreciate, Johnny, that it's very strict and, not all clubs are going to be able to pitch their transfer fees, as high as some of the highest transfer fees that are currently being earned in the Premier League. It's going to widen the gap. It's going to widen the competitive gap, I think, personally, for clubs in the Premier League, and you're going to leave clubs behind. So the government has said that they are open to changing this criteria, but it's for the football stakeholders, so the organisations that I've just mentioned, including the Player Football Association, to get together and come up with criteria. But the problem that you have is that you'll appreciate that the national associations have a different agenda to your leagues. So the leagues are interested in basically having the best league possible, having the best competitive league possible, and selling a product there. Whereas the national associations are all about homegrown players in the national team. So it may be difficult for those organisations to find some common ground.
Yeah, and I guess on that latter point as well, is there potential kind of positives for English football and the national team? And I guess we talk a bit, recently about the fact that there aren't that many young, promising British players at the moment. Could that be a strange kind of positive to come out of all of this, and that, English clubs are just going to have to grow their own youth players earlier than they would maybe otherwise?
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the potential outcomes. One of their arguments for that, or certainly the league's arguments, is that there are other countries around Europe who have a quota system. So the FA would like to see a quota system, for instance, whereby you're only allowed to field so many, foreign players. The rest have to be homegrown. Now that's seen in Italy and Serie A. Russia have done the same thing. I think Turkey's another country that's done it. And what they're basically saying is that in Italy, there's no evidence that it actually helps playing minutes for British players. So it's not as if Italian players are playing more because of this quota, and it's also not helping the national team. The Russian situation is a little bit different, whereby it is helping available minutes for Russian players, but it hasn't had any positive effect for the Russian national team. So they're looking at different arguments here. But one of the things that they have said, the government, which I find quite interesting, is that they no longer want the home countries to have a different governing body endorsement system. So remember how I just said that Scotland's system is different from England's? Northern Ireland and Wales operates the same system as Scotland, but the UK government want them all to be aligned, basically. So that could be potentially quite interesting.
Yeah, it's not the first time we've heard the word alignment in the whole Brexit debate, but I suppose if we're bringing this closer to home, and specifically the Republic of Ireland, this could be really intriguing. I mean, I was speaking to you before we went on air about Gavin Bazuna, who's gone from Shamrock Rovers, or certainly going from Shamrock Rovers to Manchester City. Now, Gavin Bazuna doesn't turn 17 until next month. So, seemingly this might not actually be a possibility a year down the line, because obviously they're both in the EU at the moment. But with the amount of young players who've gone over to Britain historically from the Republic and the North, but in specifically the Republic, this could be a game changer.
Yeah, so basically, as you and I were discussing beforehand, FIFA's regulations on the status and transfer of players are the regulations that govern the entire transfer system as we know it. They currently have a rule within the regulations, Article 19, which is in relation to the transfer of minors. Now, the general rule is that international transfer of players is only permitted if the player is over the age of 18. But there's 3 exceptions whereby it will be allowed if the player is between 16 and 18. And that is basically if the player's parent is moving over here because of work that's unconnected to football. If the player is moving to a club that's within so many kilometres of the border so many kilometres away from his home, so you'll appreciate that the club needs to be very close to the border. But the main one is that it's an intra-EU transfer, so it's a European Economic Area transfer. So it has to be basically club to club. So a club, say a club in Italy to a club in England, that would be allowed because it's intra-EU. Once the UK leaves the United Kingdom, that will basically...
Once it leaves the EU, rather.
Yeah, sorry. Once the United Kingdom leaves the EU and Brexit triggers, that rule will no longer be enjoyed, or that exception will no longer be enjoyed by clubs.
This is really intriguing because, I mean, again, without being stupid, how close to the border can you be? I mean, technically, if you were from Dundalk, which is not far at all from the border with Northern Ireland, would that make you more liable to be eligible to join a club in Britain as a minor than it would if you were, say, in Cork?
It would need to be a club that was actually... So the club that you're going to actually has to be within so many kilometres of of your domicile, basically.
Right.
So, for instance, for us in Scotland, that would be... It's very, very difficult. Newcastle would maybe get a look in if you were in a town that was literally right on the border.
Right.
And even that, it's only certain ones, because obviously depending on where you are across the border, that kilometres, I can't remember off the top of my head how many kilometres it is, but it has to be very, very close. I mean, my prediction is that the League of Ireland could potentially benefit from the fact that the transfer of minors rule will no longer be enjoyed by the clubs in the UK.
That could be absolutely huge, Laura, because, for years and years, clubs, the nursery clubs have sold on players at a very young age, 14, 15, 16 and so forth. Obviously, we're seeing that it's harder and harder for them young players to, break through. But strangely enough, Niall Quinn, who obviously went over when he was quite young himself, he's been mentioned quite a lot recently. Daniel MacDonald had an article in the Irish Independent today about his attempts to kind of revive the game here. But one of the points Niall Quinn has made is that, we could keep players at home here until they were 18. And he also did mention, now this might sound a bit far-fetched, but he mentioned the fact that Ireland could become something of a holding point for foreign players with a view to them then going to England down the line, in that a foreign player could come over here, maybe stay in Ireland for some time with the view to going to Britain. Would that be kind of a possibility, or does it sound a bit far-fetched in the sense of maybe players come from South America who could come here en route to Britain?
Well, for instance, players from South America, unless they had dual passports, wouldn't be able to do that, because a club from if they don't hold, they have to hold an EU passport to be able to do that. Certainly, players from the EU may come over to the Republic of Ireland, stay a few years, and then go to England. I'm not sure if they would do that, though. I'm not sure if they would just, stay in one of their own leagues in their home countries, and then move to the United Kingdom when they turn 18. It's certainly an interesting one, but certainly the South American players won't be able to take advantage of that unless they do have a dual passport. And a lot of them do have dual passports.
Yeah, but it's just the way you're explaining it to me here, there hasn't been much conversation over here in a sporting context. This could be really, really enormous for the future of the Premier League, and obviously for British football itself. If it could, in worst case scenario, be that difficult for them to bring in foreign players in what is an incredibly globalised league.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I think that's why the UK government is saying to the football stakeholders, get your heads together, tell us what it is you want. We're open to, relaxing this criteria, but you need to, find a solution that you're all happy with and come back to us.
And what about British players then who want to play within the EU? How does that work?
So in terms of British players moving out of the UK to a club within the EU, it will depend on what particular country it is they're looking to go to. There's not actually many countries who operate the same system that we do. the majority of them simply have quotas in terms of the number of non-EU, EEA nationals that they can register, and again, a quota for how many they can field. So what it would basically mean is once that quota is filled, if they've not been able to get, bodies out, the players won't have the opportunity to go over there because their quotas will have been met.
Fascinating, and it does sound like this long history of young players going over to England. And I guess you remember like Cesc Fabregas as a particularly big example, but all the kids from Ireland who went over so young as well, that there is a strong chance this is going to come to an end.
Yeah, I mean, I do think so. So long as I said, the government has specifically said that there will be no preferential treatment for EU players or Irish players, they have said as well. So in terms of the transfer of minors, unless I don't see that being relaxed at all. So in terms of players in between 16 and 18, your young players, I think that will come to an end, especially if there's no deal struck, if there's no kind of type of single market deal that allows free movement for EU citizens. I don't see that being an issue. I think potentially for Scotland and Northern Ireland and Wales, because the Premier League is not able to, look at young talent from out with the United Kingdom anymore, I suspect they may start looking more heavily towards Scotland, Northern Ireland and Wales. I mean, that's just my opinion, but because obviously the United Kingdom still enjoys free movement within itself. So I mean that's one point as well that could be a potential negative for the other home countries.
I guess yes or no, did the people who voted for Brexit in Britain think of all this?
Pardon, say that again?
The people who voted for Brexit, you'd just imagine now and maybe speculate that the Premier League's future wasn't at the top of their agenda, but it's going to be one hell of an interesting ride.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. I mean, I think the entire process has been an interesting ride.
Thanks a million for coming on, Laura, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thanks for the invite. Bye for now, Johnny.